M. Night has returned to the big screen with his latest high-concept thriller, Old. So let's talk about it. In Old, several families attempt to escape a beach when people start dying and they notice their children have aged several years. M. Night is an interesting director because he's made some of the best thrillers of the last 25 years with the most shocking twist endings. He's also made some of the worst wide-release films of the last 15 years, and he's made stuff everywhere in between. But the thing is, whether his movies are awesome, awful, or just kind of meh right there in the middle, they're always interesting and worth talking about. So where does Old fall on the M. Night Shyamalan spectrum? I'll let you know in just a second, but first join me down below in the comment section. What did you think about Old? Is it awesome, awful, or right there in the middle? I'd love to hear your take on it, and let's get started talking about the movie. Now, normally I sort my movie reviews into the good, the mixed, and the bad, but I don't feel like that's the best way to structure a review of a film like this, so I'm just gonna talk about the different pieces of it in general. Kicking things off, one of the things M. Night is really good at is coming up with these catchy, high concepts for films, and I think you get another one of those here where people go to a beach and they start to age very quickly. That inherently kind of sticks in your brain and makes you go, oh, what would happen? And the movie explores that from a bunch of different angles by having children there, by having old people there, and people with various medical conditions. And so it kind of plays out the scenario of all the horrifying things that could take place if you have certain health conditions or a child who suddenly has the thought process and goes through puberty in the matter of hours. How would that play out? And there's a bunch of interesting ideas like that inside of the film. And at the same time, it feels like the movie's only surface level in its exploration of these concepts. They're all just there to set up the next horrifying situation rather than to kind of tell a cohesive full story or exploring ideas. It's only there to set up the thrill, the scare, the shocking moment. And a big reason for that is the movie doesn't go in depth with any of the characters. We basically know one or two things about their personality, one or two things about their backstory, and those are just used to set up one situation that plays out later on in the movie for each of these different characters, but it never goes deeper than that. No one really has a significant character arc. There's not really a complex story here. It's just the basic premise that you got from the trailer of people are stuck on this beach, they're getting old, and horrifying things are happening because of that. That is it, and as deep as this movie goes. But on that level, there are a bunch of horrifying situations, whether it's kind of body horror with the way the aging affects certain people with certain conditions, or the idea of what children would do if they went through puberty in a very short period of time. There's some very uncomfortable ideas that play out, but they're supposed to make you uncomfortable. A movie like this is supposed to be unsettling if you think about some of the stuff. But then other moments elicited laughter rather than shock and horror when it would show like a dead body or what happened to someone. It's so on the nose, it's so overt that instead of horrifying people, they giggled because it was so uncomfortable at how awkward the execution was. At the same time, I wasn't bored by the movie. I was invested enough in the story that I cared about who was gonna survive and why and who was gonna die next. And so I was invested somewhat in the film. Speaking of the concept, it felt like there was a very inconsistent set of rules here. And some of that's just, it's very difficult to have a movie where everyone is aging very quickly and to play that out in a proper realistic fashion. But I don't feel like they made nearly a big enough effort to try and consistently visualize what that would look like. And so it just seemed like things happened because the script needed it to happen. Sometimes things would happen incredibly fast, other times it felt like very slow that you would see any differences. And then especially the rules as to why they can't leave, I don't think they gave nearly a good enough explanation as to what was going on with some of that. And so it's just frustrating when you have a movie with such a simple concept. You need to have defined rules that are applied consistently so that you actually buy into the scenario. and I didn't fully buy into it. And of course, with an M. Night Shyamalan movie, you have to talk about the twist. And the great M. Night Shyamalan twists are ones you don't see coming, but seem incredibly obvious on second viewing. They pull together the story, the character arcs, the themes perfectly and ties them up in a nice little bow that ends the movie on such a satisfying note where you almost have a 1 + 1 = 3 effect because the movie worked before the twist, but the twist is awesome, and when you put the two together, it just elevates everything to this whole new level. And then there's the other type of M. Night Shyamalan twists, the bad ones. The ones where you get to the end, learn what's really going on, and it makes the entire thing feel like this hollow, pointless exercise where there was no possible way that you could have predicted the twist finale, and it doesn't really add up to much anyway. It's just this out of nowhere turn of events that reinterprets things, but not in a way that brings meaning to anything that took place along the way. It just feels like the whole movie was a misdirect for the purpose of setting up a twist ending, but the two really don't go together all that well. And unfortunately, this movie kind of falls into that bad category. It's not fully embarrassing. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but it was like, oh, okay, that's what was going on here. Instead of answering the questions I wanted answered or reinterpreting it in a way that would be satisfying, it answers this other question that was like, okay, that's all this was all along. Okay, cool, now I know. The big reveal essentially highlights the fact that the movie was always just surface level. There was nothing down below. It was just a series of setups to have these shocking, horrifying images, and it's mostly pretty effective at delivering some of these images and disturbing ideas, but as a whole, it's not a very satisfying experience, and unfortunately not one that has any depth to it. Real quick before I give you my final thoughts on the movie, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Where do you place this one on the M. Night Shyamalan spectrum? Is it awesome? Is it awful? Is it somewhere in between? Also, tomorrow I'm going to be ranking all of the M. Night Shyamalan wide-released films. Be sure to come back tomorrow to check that one out. Like so many M. Night thrillers of the last 15 years, it's got a great central concept, some shocking moments here and there, but with such a superficial treatment of the concept and a twist that feels like it came out of nowhere, this is on the lower half of M. Night's filmography. Overall, it's only a C on the entertainment scale of 5.5, and if you're an M. Night fan, just rent this one or wait until it shows up on streaming. Be sure to come back tomorrow when I'm going to rank all of M. Night Shyamalan's wide-released films. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.